This week on Quality Digest Live, we look at the pros and cons of unions.
Plus, top-down management doesn't work. Or does it? We'll find out when we come back.
Today's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is Hexagon Metrology. Hexagon carries the widest range of quality brands. With an extensive support network, Hexagon is also your partner. Hexagon Metrology. We are metrology.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 25th, 2013. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
That's right, and I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Okay, well, here's a heads up for those of you who use the Food and Drug Administration's WebTrader web interface to send your submissions to the FDA. According to a SureX blogger, Tamar June, the FDA has warned WebTrader users to delete their WebTrader inboxes or risk losing all the documents contained within them in the future. WebTrader is supposed to be a low-volume submission tool for submitting your documents and so forth to the FDA. This obviously only applies if you're an FDA-compliant company. However, some companies have apparently been using the WebTrader system as a file server or archival system, says June. So for those of you not familiar with it, the WebTrader inbox at the FDA provides users a view of submissions sent to the FDA and receipts and acknowledgements received from the FDA. It's not Google Docs. It is not off-site storage. Unfortunately, some companies have been using it as off-site storage for their FDA submissions, with the result that about 1/4 of the inboxes within WebTrader contain hundreds of documents, with some of them containing several thousand documents. That's per company. So one company, I believe, had as many as 3,000 documents stored on the WebTrader inbox. Because you set up your own inboxes. And other companies, many companies, about 1/4 of them had several hundred. Well, according to June, in an email sent to WebTrader users, the FDA informed them that, quote, on February 1st, 2013, we, the FDA, will start deleting documents in WebTrader account inboxes without notice. Without notice. Without notice. Any WebTrader inbox with more than 20 documents in it will be cleaned, deleted, eliminated starting February 1st, 2013. Once the inbox is cleared of documents, receipts, and acknowledgments, they cannot be retrieved. So, we strongly advise you to download receipts and acknowledgments from your inbox after each transmission. End of quote, along with some of my editorial comment. So there, it is not off-site storage.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that no one is doing that to my Outlook inbox because that would be disastrous. But yeah, no, I mean they did give you a warning. It's not really without warning because you know.
I understand exactly why this happens. I mean, I'm dealing with the FDA and I've got all these documents and they've given me a nice little repository for them. Sure. So why shouldn't I just keep them there? But that's not. It was really intended for submission and not for storage. So store them on your own computer or your own in-house server and then upload them later or face the consequences.
That's right. If you need some document control, we have plenty of people that can help you out with that. Okay. Also in the news this week, the Asia Pacific Quality Organization, or the APQO, recently handed out its annual Armand v. Feigenbaum Life Achievement Medal to a familiar face, H. James Harrington.
Go Jim.
Go Jim. Dr. Harrington is among the most distinguished and decorated quality professionals on the planet. He's written dozens of books, traveled millions of miles, literally millions of miles, and influenced countless people and organizations with his theory of poor quality cost and total improvement management.
That's right.
Jim is also a longtime Quality Digest columnist and contributor, and in fact, he played an important role in all of this. He was the first guest of our Profiles in Quality video series. Dirk, you remember that? You went down to Los Gatos?
Went down to his house in Los Gatos and interviewed Jim for several hours. That's right. He is an interesting man to talk to. This guy is, I mean, he's 80 years old. He's got stories you wouldn't believe from all over the world, the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of quality management. So
he's been everywhere. He has been.
That's right.
Now, the APQO's Feigenbaum Life Achievement Medal is awarded to an individual demonstrating the, quote, relentless pursuit of performance improvement for a minimum of 25 years, unquote. And Jim certainly embodies that and then some.
Yes, he does.
And I hope I'm not actually dating him here.
I think I already did.
You actually did. But Jim actually began his professional career as an apprentice toolmaker at IBM in 1947. Wow. 1947. So congratulations again to Jim Harrington for a very, very well-deserved award. Okay, so for further information on this story and all the pieces we're going to be covering on today's show, just click the story links right below the player page, right down there.
Okay, and congratulations, Jim. So, interesting article. Got a lot of comments, and I actually was kind of surprised that the comments were actually kept themselves, except for one email, kept themselves nicely in check in terms of tone. A recent article from Lansing Community College professor David Schwinn, who's also a contributor to PQ Systems blog. He wrote about how he sent college students from his organizational behavior class to interview protesters. These were labor union members and others who were converging on the Michigan State Capitol in anticipation that the governor would sign a right-to-work law for Michigan. Now, a right-to-work law simply means that people who work in places that have unions can choose to not join the union and therefore not pay any union dues. So, not too surprising, what his students discovered in their interviews is that many of the people protesting, remember most of these were union members, said that they were worried about the, quote, destruction of unions and about the loss of medical benefits and so forth. Others said that in their experience, non-union labor was less productive and less skilled than trained union workers, and so they were concerned about the lack of quality or skilled workforce and so forth. And of course, Schwinn did point out that there was some flip sides to a lot of these comments, with Schwinn pointing out that many people claim that unions cause low productivity and prevent people from being fired who should be fired. So, I mean, really, if you read this article and you follow union arguments at all, there was nothing really here in terms of the opinions of union promoters or detractors, except to me, it did point out something that we as quality professionals should always be thinking about, I believe, is how do unions fit in with today's quality and productivity conscious companies and consumers? Are they part of the solution or are they part of the problem? And I think there's a lot of arguments made on both sides of this. I have my own beliefs. Can and should labor and management hold hands, sing kumbaya, and work together to solve U.S. productivity and quality issues? Or should they be like our government has been for the last few decades, sit there in their sandbox, hug their toys to their chest, and cry, mine. You know what I feel now about, about how our government runs and kind of how I feel unions run very often. Not surprising. I mean, look, I think the truth about unions lies somewhere in the middle. I mean, I'm not a big fan of unions. I think in some cases they are still necessary, just as they were necessary 70 or 80 years ago, and for the same reasons. But increasingly, I think that even when necessary at a particular company, unions are really, I don't know, they're more of a crutch than as a means to solving a problem, and the problem is bad management. We got this one comment which kind of sums up, this came in later in the week. There's a comment we got from one reader, and if we can put that slide up, so if we can put it up on the screen there, thanks. Unionization is an indicator of poor leadership. Companies can offer everything a union can, and more, except many companies choose not to. But I have seen unions provide reliable, competent workers in industries that cannot recruit a temporary workforce for construction projects any other way. As their surviving unions work on their strategies, they may transform themselves into true partners that verify the competence of their members and assist them with improving their competencies from wheelwright to project manager, for example. And if we can, that was from Jay Broomfield. I'm sorry, Jay Broomfield, one of our constant readers and actually commenters. You know, forward-thinking companies have learned that if you treat your employees well, you will get better productivity. You know, less absenteeism, less turnover, and I think this is because they're happy workers. And by the way, happy workers don't usually ask to be unionized. So my experience with many, if not all, union shops is that I have seen that the acrimony between labor and management just creates an atmosphere where labor and management are only willing to work up to the minimum requirements of their labor contract and no more. To me, that isn't a way to run a business. And I'm not saying, I don't want to bash unions all the way, because like I said, I think sometimes they're necessary, but I think unfortunately most labor contracts cater to the lowest common denominator, not only for the workers, but for management too. Yeah. I mean, it's like management is, okay, you're going to give me a contract, I'm only going to go so far with it, and that's all I'm going to do. Whereas in a cooperative atmosphere, they might be willing to go further. And also, the workers might be willing to go further if they're in an atmosphere that promotes everybody working together and having a good working relationship and good wages, benefits, and a working environment.
Well, as you pointed out, I mean, in the early part of the 20th century, unions were prevalent. It really started to come to the fore because it was necessary.
Yeah, I mean,
working conditions.
Literally sweatshops.
Yeah, literally sweatshops.
In which we don't have literally sweatshops, I don't think, in the United States.
Well, certainly not nearly as much.
Not
but
nearly
I mean,
as much, yeah.
And you see it in other countries where there really isn't a union presence that still exists. But so I mean, it's necessary. The unions were started for a very good reason, and unions exist today for a very good reason. But certainly, it will tend to cater to the lowest common denominator at certain times, and we've seen it in proliferation of this in other realms as well. I mean, look at public schools, for instance. I mean, No Child Left Behind and Teach to the Test. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that foster an attitude from youth up of maybe an attitude of do the minimum, get by, and you don't challenge the top level. You kind of support the lowest level. So there's a lot of levels of society where this is an issue, this is a problem. So I see what you're saying about unions. Personally, I'm rather in favor of unions. I still think that they need to be in existence. Again, looking at places where there aren't unions like China, or they're starting, you can see why they're necessary.
Yeah, you can. I think an indication of what's happening to unionism in the United States, it has drastically declined, hugely declined over the last several decades, is that I think more and more companies are realizing they got the memo, set up a good environment, treat your employees right, listen to them, be cooperative with them, and everybody is part of the same team. And when you have an environment like that, there's no need for a union to come in. They're not invited in.
Yeah, right.
Unions are invited in, like several people said, when there's bad management.
Right.
And if you don't have bad management, the union's not going to get traction. And I believe that's one of the main reasons we've seen a decline. I think more and more companies just understand. It's better for the bottom line.
Yeah, and management is getting better.
Right.
Well, on the topic of management, there's a related, maybe a related story that we ran yesterday in Quality Digest Daily by our good friend Davis Balistracci called Postponing the Struggle for Shared Accountability, and that ran yesterday in QDD. It was from Davis Balistracci. Now, many of you may have noticed that we promote the show, obviously, in the days before we run it, and you may have noticed we initially were planning to run a story by Mike Micklewright on document control, but we reread this story, Dirk and I, yesterday, and said, gosh, that piece from Davis had some really cool, compelling content. So we're gonna push back Mike. Mike actually is here. Mike Micklewright's going to be here in Northern California with us in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have him on the show on February 8th. So look out for that. Mark your calendars, and we'll talk to Mike about document control and some other stuff at that time. But let me jump into this one now, because this is a good piece by Davis Balistracci about this topic. Now, Davis sets this up, and he makes points about what really is the management styles that work today. What management styles work, what management styles don't work, and what's best for the worker for most productivity and satisfaction. And surprise, there's a case to be made, which he makes here, for the top-down autocratic management style. Yeah. Let me explain. Now, he references a management role-playing simulation in which 3 teams are given a case study and a problem statement, and asked to solve the problem and create solutions and ways to move forward with the particular problem. So there were 3 teams. The first team was meant to embrace a standard top-down management style, where there was certain elements of the team were the top-level managers, and they were going to dictate basically to the rest of the team what was going to be done and how they were going to do it. Team 2 was kind of cheerleaders and cosmetics. There were managers, but they made a kind of a faux effort to embrace the rest of the team and pump them up with slogans about do it, and this is the kind of the flavor of the month, and this is going to work, and it's going to be great. Team 3 now was a true participatory team where everyone had to take accountability, and it was a very kind of a flat team where there really wasn't a hierarchy, and everybody had to take accountability and do the work themselves. Okay, so that's the setup. The results were pretty interesting. The results of this were pretty interesting. Team 1 finished the simulation quickly. They finished their team meeting very quickly. There was very clearly defined elements of what was to be done.
And that was the top-down one?
That was the top-down one,
okay.
Where the autocratic managers basically said, you do that, you do that, you do that. Everybody was kind of felt like they were run over a little bit and dominated, but the work got assigned and it got done. And they were out of there quickly. They did it quick. Team 2 reported that they felt kind of cynical, kind of manipulated by the full managers, the people that were running the show. But it was entertaining. They ran their team meeting like kind of like a variety show, and it was fun. So they said, it's kind of a shell game, but it was fun. What the heck? It was fine. So they kind of did their work too. Team 3 was very upset. They were very miserable. They felt as though they were rudderless. They felt as though management had abdicated. They felt they kind of were begrudgingly did the work. They ended up with 20 suggestions for improvement about how to solve the problem, which they all had to actually do and own. And they were kind of upset about that. They felt like this is a burden for them. So what's the moral of the story here? As Davis points out, is that, well, you know what? As much as we say, and we say all the time on this show, we write about it all the time, and a lot of people write about the fact that management really needs to embrace workers and have participation and have them own the process and be involved. As much as we say that, that's not what this simulation indicated. People are more comfortable in a top-down autocratic system where they are assigned work, you do this, you do that, you do that. They don't have to worry about the fuzzy borders of where my work begins and where yours does, and really pushing forward 5 whys and having to examine and do root cause analysis. They want somebody else to do that. Tell me what to do.
Well, I'm wondering if what we're really talking about is, and maybe the way this should work, is I think the importance of being listened to. So you have your discussions, you have where management is involved in the process. But in the end, they kind of like take the data, they take the suggestions, and then they turn around and give the marching orders. So it's like it's still top down, but it's based on feedback from what they've gotten from discussions with employees?
That's right. I personally think that is a good solution to this. One of the things Davis talks about in the piece is this idea that your system is perfectly designed. He says this all the time. Yeah. Your system is perfectly designed to give you the results that it's designed to give you. And within the framework of management, within the framework of what he's talking about here, that really communicates by certain people self-select to be managers. Those that are comfortable making decisions and tend to be autocratic are the ones that most organizations rise to the top and become managers. Because a lot of people aren't comfortable making decisions, saying, okay, listen to the data, okay, you're going to go, we're going to do that. Right. So the system fosters that. And he's saying, how do we change that system to not foster that? How do we change the system so that, yes, managers manage and they make decisions, but they do listen and they do embrace all that and they do let the employees have their oar on the water, but it's a rudder. It's not rudderless, and that's what Team 3 really complained about. Is they felt like management abdicated, they were rudderless, they had no direction, and they didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
So it's a combination of that. Davis doesn't really address what you just said, but I got the same thing. Was that combination? I think is what makes the most sense.
Yeah, I was just, as you were talking, I was trying to think how this ties back into to a union story, and in some ways it does. It does, too. Yeah. Because there you've got a defined system,
and you've also got a top-down. You know, unions, for all the talk about how they're very participatory, really union management really is, in many cases, very autocratic.
Yeah, well, and not only union management, but then company management. Sure. So you've got both sides just kind of dictating the roles, so everybody knows what they're supposed to do. So I would say, I'm just going to spitball this, that within a union environment, properly run, that the job gets done to the level that it's capable of being done within that system, which may not be the most productive, it may not even be the most way, but it's probably done consistently.
It is, and that's a big benefit.
Which could be a big benefit.
And when you combine that with...
Maybe consistently mediocre quality, but it's consistent.
The process is within control.
Right.
But again, that combined with the psychology of people, of people that fall into their roles, those that are dictatorial tend to be managers, those that want to follow tend to be followers, is what I think has fostered this and caused this. So it was an interesting article from Davis, and that's one that I think you all out there should read. So check that out. It's below the player page right there for your reading pleasure.
Okay, well, moving on from, let's say, management issues to something a little bit more shop floory. Labels. Let's talk about labels. Labels are key components of production process control, inventory management, traceability, worker safety, packaging, marketing, basically any productivity-raising activities. Their impact on product quality, you may not think about this, but their impact on quality is huge. Errors in labeling parts and materials during the production process, for instance, can lead to defective finished products. Depending on the product, label defects can cause otherwise defect-free products to be non-conforming to quality standards. You don't have to look too far to kind of see where that comes in. So let's look at certain medical device and chemical companies. Compliance with strict labeling requirements is mandatory. In fact, one of the biggest reasons for product recalls is not defective products, it's defective or non-compliant labeling.
Absolutely.
So if your labeling isn't right within certain industries, that actually is a means for litigation.
It's a non-conformance.
So there's actually an element of risk management that comes into labeling. So you need to consider labels as equally important as any other document or part in your quality management system. They really should be treated as such. So here to discuss the importance of label management is Jim Hartford, Manager of Customer Support at IBS America, Inc. Hello, Jim.
Hey there, guys. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, before we get started, first of all, just to kind of set the stage, when we're talking about labels within this context, what are we really talking about?
Well, I mean, we see labels in just about everything that we purchase in life. Labels can be anything from pictograms to 2D barcodes to standard barcodes, and even our RFID tags, which help you to identify a product in any place it may be. So, I think that, understanding that labels are used for many reasons and in many places is the importance of this.
So when we talk about, when you say like RFID and barcodes, so we're talking labels that are used for, let's say, for tracking a product throughout its lifetime. So it could be from cradle to grave, or it could be maybe just within the manufacturing environment. So we're talking about those kind of labels, as well as informational labels that might be something that the consumer sees. Is that right?
For instance, yeah, the chemical industry. When you set up a container, you have to make sure that there is human readable and pictorial text on that label to identify things such as safety and how to handle that product and so forth and so on. These things are governed, say, by the FDA and not the FDA, but the chemical industry. So, you really, when you're thinking at a label, there's a lot of bits and pieces of data that go on a label that come from many different areas and that are governed by your standards and your regulatory bodies. And so when you look at a label, you don't really see just how important or necessarily all the information that label is providing.
Well, is this really, how much of an issue is this? I mean, do people not really already give importance to labels? Is this really just an afterthought? Or, I mean, what's been your experience with this?
Well, I don't think that people don't really give importance to labels, but I mean, I really don't know if they quite understand the levels at which labels are used for traceability, right from the supplier chain through the production line, out the distribution center, and how it's used for recall purposes, and just how it really describes that product and the product's life cycle. And again, the importance of safety and HAZCOM issues that may be related to a particular product. But I really think what they don't understand is just what goes into producing a label design to process management of that label, and making sure that that label is uniformly produced across all production lines, avoiding the silo approaches to label management.
So actually, great lead-in. Yeah, you talk about silo approaches. So give us an example of how label management can be or should be a part of your quality management system.
Well, like anything, you need control systems, and if you're dealing with purpose-designed approaches to label management, such as silo systems, you run the risk of, say, one production line in China designing and developing the label in one format versus one in the U.S. So you could technically get a product with multiple different design approaches to labels. What a quality management system can do is it can help you in the change management process of labels, bring in the appropriate personnel together so that they can sit around a table and make the appropriate decisions for label formatting, so that there is uniformity and centralization of how that label is going to be rolled out on the shop floor. And then, in addition, it provides the ability to to create process documentation to build around the label design procedures, and train your shop floor operators so that they are implementing these labeling systems correctly.
Hey, Jim, talk a little bit about risk, and we touched on risk a little bit here, and maybe walk us through some scenarios about, you know, how labels are used if there is a recall, for instance, and what is the problem if the labeling is not good labeling, and how that works versus good labeling in the case of a recall, let's say.
So in the case of a recall, I mean, if, for instance, I received a product recently, and the instruction manual and the information in there did not match the actual product that I purchased. So it was actually for a previous version of that product. So in light of that, you could have a lot or a particular version of a product that went out the door where they affixed the wrong version of the label. Okay, so on a recall, there's no traceability for that. You've got a product out there with the wrong label on it. You're pulling the wrong product back.
Gotcha. Well, thanks, Jim. Well, you know, Jim, we got to run, but I want to tell everyone out there before we let you go, we have a webinar with you and on this coming Tuesday, the 29th of January. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern, right. 11 a.m. Pacific, and Dirk's hosting, and you're going to be joining in on that call, that webinar. So we want everybody to go out and register for that. You can register right below the player page right here, and check that out. It's going to be a good webinar. We look forward to talking to you then next week about this, Jim.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for having me.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right. Going to be a good webinar. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, you know, it's funny when they first started talking to us about this webinar and the topic, I was like, you know, labels. But I mean, if you think about it, I mean, particularly from a consumer perspective, I mean, everything you know about a product is on that label, not only in terms of branding. Yep. And you want to make sure you recognize everything and everything looks the same. Otherwise, it's, well, what's this versus that? Yeah. But also, like you pointed out, you know, in terms of sometimes compliance issues, the labeling has to be right. And not just the words, the graphics too. And the graphics there's a lot that goes into that. Safety graphics. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's good stuff. Good stuff there. So look out for that again next week. That's the 29th of January on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. That's right. And next week, we have a new live show coming out, going to be called Gauging Quality. And that is next Thursday, January 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Get your questions to us right now about surface plate calibration and leveling systems. That's what we're going to be talking about. This show is going to be predominantly about calibrating a surface plate. Most people recognize this, but some of you don't. Your surface plate is just as precise an instrument, more so actually, than the devices that are being measured on them. Your height stands, your whatever you've got, angle meters, whatever. You're putting them on a surface plate. You have to know how that surface plate is characterized. You got to know the characteristics of your surface plate, because that is actually feeding into your measurement. We're going to be talking about that on this show live. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask us. Actually, ask Craig Howell. I'll just be standing there. Looking pretty. Looking pretty. Like you always do. I'll do the Vanna White thing. This is a gauge. And Craig will do all the explanation. But we do want to get some questions in ahead of time. So if you have any questions related to surface plates or anything else related to gauging, email them to qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll get them in the queue, and we'll be sure to get them on the air with myself and Craig Howell. And Craig Howell, CPM Labs. Craig, many of you have seen Craig's work. Dirk, you and Craig have worked together on a number of episodes of Technology Lives and Gauging Basics. Gauging Basics, right. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. So check out this live show. It's going to be fun. Half-hour show, again, that'll be on the 31st, next Thursday. Same time we do all of our stuff, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So
check that out. And again, get your questions in here at QDL, qualitydigest.com. Get them in now on surface plates and leveling systems. Okay, well, that's our show, Dirk. But before we go, we want to thank this week's sponsor. Hexagon Metrology is committed to helping you control your processes, enhance the quality of your products, and increase efficiencies. They empower you to stay one step ahead of a changing world with their wide range of product offerings, nearly 200 years of expertise, and an extensive support network. Hexagon Metrology, where quality comes together. To find out more, just click on the banner ad below or just to the right of the player page right down there.
That's right. Well, thank you, Hexagon, for sponsoring this week's episode. And that is it for today.
Yep, that's it.
And a great show. A lot of interesting articles this week in Quality Digest.
Yeah, thanks to Jim Hartford again for joining us for IBM. We'll see you on Tuesday of IBS. And yeah, great show. Thanks everybody for being there and giving us the great articles, Davis Balstracci and David Twin. Yeah, good stuff.
And be sure, all you have to do to leave a comment on an article, if you read it, all you have to do is be sure you log on to the site. If you don't already have a membership to the site, it's in the upper right corner. There's just a very quick form to fill out. You fill it out, and you become a member of the site, and that allows you to leave comments. And we encourage people to comment on any article that they see on the site.
That's right.
Once again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next week.
Next week. We'll see you then. Bye.
Thank you.